Hi, Scott Yokel. I'm Director of Research Computing at Harvard, and Wayne Gilmore, who's not here today, Director of Research Computing at Boston University, and a number of us within the MJHPCC consortium worked last spring to create this concept and have started the process of applying for funding in different types of ways. And really, the idea is a collaborative idea that some of us had, but the way in which I picture it, because I came from a chemistry background in computational chemistry, but prior to that as a graduate student, right, we'd have wet labs, and if I wanted to get research done, there was a lot of infrastructure that was already provided. I would take my sample, I might go to the NMR facility. I take my sample, I might go to the mass spectroscopy facility, and things like that. So what we really wanted to create was a place where an in-researcher could take their data and go to this facility and get their research done without having to be, like in my field, an analytical chemist, which would have to know all the ins and outs of how the instrument works in order to make it run. Okay? And then in the past, we have served some communities really well. Since there were high-performance computing systems, the likes of chemists and physicists and stuff have been using them, have been very accustomed to using that type of platform, and all of the tooling that they design is on that type of platform. So at Boston University, in their group, they've been very successful with deploying large-scale infrastructure. They have tens of thousands of cores. They have 600 software packages, right? So researcher does not want to know how intricacies of compiling a code, and so we provide that service for them. There's 725 different research projects, 2,200 active users at BU. And to support all of that, it takes a pretty good sizable amount of staff. As you'll notice, it takes quite a bit of systems engineering. I think one thing to note is that when Oren mentioned earlier is that they have currently just 4 engineers working on the MOC. There's 4.5 here working on the HPC development, right? But on top of that, there are 9 full-time employees focused on engaging with researchers. And that's one of the bigger differences that we've done historically in HPC that hasn't existed yet in some cloud types. Especially if you go to a public cloud, there is nobody to help you do the thing that you need. There's no help ticket system, there's no office hours, there's nobody installing your software for you or telling you what you should do. Because all you're really concerned about is your science, you're not concerned about the technology underneath, right? At Harvard, we've done some of the same things. We have a little bit larger system. We have thousands of software codes. We have 3,500 active users on the cluster. I had to look at my staff and say which part actually focuses more on HPC than they do on storage and VMs, and so I'm kind of estimating we have about 6 full-time staff that are focused on the system engineering with regards to HPC and the underlying performance storage systems. And then on top of that, similar to BU, we have 8 full-time staff that are focused on engaging with researchers. So again, that is the kind of thing that makes that a successful environment for the researchers. And so I've already alluded to some of this, but I come from the HPC background. It's taken me, I feel like, a couple of years to be like, why would we want to have an internal cloud for people, right? Why wouldn't they just use the HPC? I had to learn it. Why wouldn't they just learn it? Right? But it's a very fixed environment, whereas the cloud environment is a very flexible environment, right? We as the system administrators design the system and you use it. You don't get to have much say in the way in which it runs as a researcher. But that makes the complexity of a cloud sometimes daunting to a researcher. They don't know what they need to choose, right? They don't know how to deploy a Windows environment for themselves in a cloud or a Ubuntu nightly build because their software gets updated every week. So that brings some kind of challenges, right? The HPC environment also geared toward command line parallel processing with large central storage. And in the cloud, it's very distributed, right? You have all sorts of different types of customized workload managers. You can create your own, right? And you can have a variety of different things. You can have infrastructure as a service that you consume. You could have a platform. You could have just software, right? And I think there's a lot of the research community that just wants software as a service, right? And so in the HPC space, there's actually been a huge change. The largest HPC installations across the US are part of the NSF-funded Exceed project. More than 50% of the workloads on those is through a web interface, like a scientific gateway. And so our vision, which is very similar to the things that Oren said earlier, is to take the concepts and the things that the MOC and the MGHPC have already done really, really well, and kind of bring it to a little more of a production type of environment in which we have numerous people engaging with researchers. In doing so, we hope to build this framework that is really geared towards data-driven discovery, and that is truly underneath run by multiple institutions, right? And this doesn't mean just our 5 academic institutions, but other partners as well. And so when we envision a laboratory, right, where people would come and do their research, we think about 3 different spaces. There's this production space, and so that's the space that Wayne and I are trying to really get our heads around, like how do we create the thing within MJHPCC like we've all individually done for the HPC systems. And then there's this collaboration space, a space where researchers can, research staff and researchers can, in certain domains, can bond together. Get the likes of the Broad and other places in our current area that have really strong presence of staff to engage with researchers more broadly. And also a place where different system administrators from across different boundaries can really come together and have a place for that. And then the innovation space. So a lot of the things we've heard about today are places where different people like Intel are innovating and they want to deploy something, right? There's numerous grad students that their research is innovative and they're wanting to study this as their discipline. And so we made a nice pretty picture to give you a big idea. And so what currently exists are 300,000 cores worth of HPC in this facility, right? That's pretty massive. If just 25% of that was made available as compute infrastructure for a cloud, that would be massive, right? And so in this Ceph storage space, we have the Northeast Storage Exchange project. That's an NSF-funded project that's by all of us. So we will have solved this storage problem and have a centralized storage problem. That's what we're building this year. And then we will have things like OpenStack and OpenShift. And I think something that you've heard a little bit about, you heard somebody talk about in the Open Data Hub about the concept of curated apps. That's, I think, that if we can get this community collaboration space to be able to publish their workflows so that another person could take their workflow, maybe take one container out and plop their own container of one of the workflows in, then there would be this huge difference in the way we would engage as researchers in comparison to if you were just in the public cloud. I think that's one of the most important concepts around this. And then the innovation space, what I just said, is in the middle so that different things are deployed and through a process they will become adopted, right? They might be adopted upstream by Red Hat, and then we would then pull them down in the production space. Different concepts like that. That's what the real big picture is, to create this ecosystem where we can all work together to create a whole user services space that's part of this production space, right? Where you have research facilitators that are inside of our groups that can handle engaging with customers or users outside of our own institution, if needed be, right? And then, of course, doing all this, it's important that we have some kind of economy of trading resources back and forth. So when I think about the next steps, part of the production space is that we need to be able to create a critical mass of personnel, of professional staff, in twofold. One is the systems group, right, to run this facility. And it doesn't need to be one group running it and everybody using it, right? It needs to be multiple different institutions. We may go through the process of different institutions taking the lead, but it needs to truly be a multi-institutional effort, as we're all out there at different times as well. And then there needs to be a group of facilitators, right? And so some of the work that the MJHPCC has in the Cyber Team project, there's this thing called Ask CI that I think will be really beneficial for us to help collaborate in that space. So go to ask.ci.com and you'll see what I'm talking about. And then this collaboration space, I already kind of alluded to that. And then the innovation space is obvious. By all the work that MOC has done with all of the industry partners, we're becoming the place where we can do that. I think the thing that I would say for the industry partners is the thing that we will have is the ability to draw science, real-world science into that space to deploy. And that's all I have for today.